How long have you been a driving instructor in New York State?
Oh boy, well, probably about 13 years now, overall, off and on, since about 2002 is when I started initially, but family business, you know, I remember riding in the back seat when my dad would teach every once in a while, and just being enamored with what he did and how he did it, and so it's always been in my blood.
Choosing your vocation, do you have to have nerves of steel?
Preferably no nerves at all, actually. I think the nerve endings are kind of gone by now. I do remember back in the day, when I would ride in the passenger seat in the back every once in a while with my dad, and he would let them get so close to those side mirrors, and I was like, oh. And then now I just let them drive right by and say, you know, we drove right underneath that side mirror. If they were the same height, we would have hit it. Really? I have no idea. So yeah, it gets pretty fun out there.
What is the process that one goes through when they go to your driving school or decide that they need driving lessons?
That's a great question. People come all different walks of life, right? All different countries. I've taught people from all 6 inhabitable continents, well over 100 countries. And some people come out of need. They don't have another option. Hey, I need to get my license. I don't have anyone to ever drive with. I've never driven before. And then you get those who, hey, my daughter, son has been driving for a while, and we just want to make sure you show them the finer things. Then we get people who have their license and they say, hey, I've never been on the highway before. Can you do that with me? Or, man, I'm so scared of bigger intersections. Can you do that with me? What's fascinating is probably half the people we teach are actually out of high school and college. We teach a lot of people who are older, a lot of people who have either come from other countries or people who come from densified cities where they had public transportation like New York City. Get a lot of people who are 25, 30 years old, they moved out of New York or Toronto or wherever where they had public transportation, and now they need a car.
You mentioned that some of the people that come to you have driver's licenses, but they've never driven on a highway. How can that be? How can you get a driver's license without ever driving on a highway?
That's such a great question. And actually, in New York State, there's not highway driving mandated for the road test itself. So in New York State, you actually only do 30 miles an hour or less. The city speed limit, the common speed law in any municipality is 30 miles an hour. And so that's all the test is in New York State. Is about 10 minutes, maybe 12, and it's just all slow speed. So there's no highway requirement to be certified to get a license on a Class D, on a regular driver's license.
Now, before one goes to your driving school, they have to get a permit in New York State, right?
Yes, sir.
Talk about that process.
Okay, so if they are under the age of 18, they get their permit and they have to wait. There's a waiting period. It's 6 months, and they're supposed to drive for at least 50 hours, 15 hours of driving at night. What's interesting is the moment one turns 18, they can go get their license the next week. So all of those restrictions are taken off for those who are under the age of 18. But they have to take a test, and that's a written test. They can go online and do practice tests, and then they go take a written test, pay a fee, and they have their permit. And then the real fun starts when they get to go on the road.
Now, when you start giving driving instructions to someone on a permit or someone that wishes to get a license or someone that has a license,
Yep.
What is the process?
That's a great question. So a lot of people approach it differently.
Okay.
I'm very much, let's just go see what you got. So I don't want to wait in a parking lot and just do a couple of circles. I rock up to people's houses, or they meet me, and I say, okay, you're driving, because inevitably, a lot of times, guess where the person who's driving heads to when they get in the car? They go to the passenger seat because they're so used to riding. And so I get them in the driver's seat. I say, whenever you're ready, let's go. I don't even tell them about their mirrors or anything. I just want to get them driving, because that's really the first step. So for me, that's really important, is they get driving, they realize, oh, this isn't as hard as I thought. As long as they know where the gas and the brake are, we're okay.
Especially where the brake is.
Yes. Which thankfully I have one too. So in case of emergency, we can hopefully.
Now, what are some of the biggest problems that students encounter as they learn how to drive?
everything at once. So it's that multitasking thing. There's this new term out there called complexipacity, or the capacity for complexity. And I find that that's probably the hardest thing really for any of us. I mean, the more tasks we do at the same time, the harder it is to not burn the soup while you're baking something in the oven, the more things we're doing, the kids crying, etc. So all of those distractions at once, as well as all of the things coming at us, it's very difficult.
What is the difference between learning on a standard shift and an automatic shift besides a lot of bucking?
I'm sorry, what's a standard shift?
A standard shift.
I'm just kidding. They just don't really exist anymore. But yeah, so we always call it the third pedal, right? That third pedal, the clutch. Definitely different. I don't recommend actually that someone who's never driven learns on a manual. Some people do, and I just quite frankly think that that is torture. But automatics are much easier for somebody to just learn again how to drive a vehicle. It's essentially like driving a golf cart. I mean, driving a car and driving one isn't any more difficult than a golf cart. But then again, you add in that third pedal, and all of a sudden things get a lot crazier. And it's not worth $600 in a clutch to teach somebody how to drive. Just get a little beater and get an automatic.
Well, it's funny, you had mentioned that they were really not around that much anymore.
Yeah.
And yesterday on 787, I saw a car bucking, and I said to my wife, "That's got to be."
Maybe they're learning how to drive standard.
Maybe I saw the one left in New York New York State.
Oh yep. No, it's true. I mean, they're a lot of fun to drive. Even the economy, the fuel economy. People would always say, "Oh, I get a manual for fuel economy," but automatics are just so much better technologically speaking. The transmissions are so much better. There are varieties of transmissions now for automatics. All of the regulations as far as the EPA are requiring vehicles to be more fuel friendly, fuel efficient. Hybrids, you can't obviously get a manual on a hybrid. We teach on hybrids. I teach on a plug-in hybrid. And they're amazing. They're miraculous. Quite frankly, I wouldn't want to teach on a manual. I teach people on their manual because it's their car, but it's not my car.
Now, what is the difference between teaching a kid how to drive and teaching an adult or someone in their 20s how to? There's a big difference?
So it ranges from person to person. Age definitely matters, pardon me, but what I find actually matters more is someone's context, where they come from. So we have people, I just had a wonderful middle-aged lady, came from subcontinental Asia, and she had tried other driving schools and came to us, and we got her driving and everything, and she had never ridden a bike before. So she really didn't have any concept, because of her background, how the wheels worked, how even being behind any type of wheel, steering anything worked. And so being patient with people and figuring out what they know from their background. Then you get people who are suburban, who have been driving lawnmowers. I drove my lawnmower from the time I can't even remember. I would sit on my dad's lap steering the lawnmower. And so it really depends on where the person comes from. I like learning about the individual and then teaching according to how they learn, their learning style, what their background is, how can I relate to them, how can I give them a metaphor, how can I give a teachable kind of experience that helps them and attach it to what they already know.
Now, I saw that Hillary Clinton, talking about teaching adults, hasn't driven a car since 1996.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. All right.
What is it like to teach an adult who has not driven for such a long period of time how to drive again? Or can they just sit down and is it like riding a bicycle? You just start over? Believe
it or not, I think it's easier than riding a bicycle because you don't have to worry about the cardio. So you don't have to worry about pumping the legs or, man, I'm out of breath. I actually take my grandmother, who is 91. She still has her license, but she freely gave up her car. But I try to take her about once a year. I just say, hey, Grandma, let's get behind the wheel. I just want to drive to make sure you can in case there's an emergency. And she does very well. The oldest person I've ever had pass their test is 87. A guy by the name of Stanley, fascinating man. He was in World War II as a child. He grew up in Poland. And basically, as long as they are there in mind, it doesn't matter. We can have not done something for 20 years. We might be a little rusty, but it definitely comes back quick, as long as the muscle memory's there.
Now, you were talking about teaching adults how to drive. What's the big challenge for teaching kids?
Well, my dad always had a saying, and he actually had a sign, and I think the sign was for me. and it said, quick, hire a teenager while they still know everything. I remember for me, from the time I was 16 to the time I was 25, it's amazing how much my dad learned in 9 years, but really what it was is I actually learned some things.
Sure.
My grandfather actually nicknamed me Mr. I Know, because I would just always say, I know. I didn't even realize it, but at 16, 17, maybe not every kid's like this, but I sure was. We just think we know more than we do. And so probably the toughest thing for a teenager is that teachability. Are they willing to actually be vulnerable to instruction, to learn? And that's why we personally strictly do private lessons. So it's one-on-one. We don't have anybody else in the car, so that it's extremely comfortable. We don't have to worry about egos. We don't have to worry about the perception of people in the back seat. We don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, they almost killed us, and now they go to school, and everybody's talking about the bad experience, because we all have bad experiences. So that's probably the hardest thing. It's just the teachable nature of people. Because as a teenager, I know, there you go, I know I knew more than I actually knew. And my point is that I really didn't know nearly as much as I thought.
Remember when I was starting to learn how to drive, I was kind of scared the first few times I got behind the wheel. Is that the same?
Oh my goodness. So there you go, Mr. I Know, right? So here I am. I'd driven on my grandfather's farm. He had a little Daihatsu 4-speed that used to be on it was a Coast Guard truck that used to be on an aircraft carrier. So that was a manual, going back to manual. First time I ever drove that, I was 14. My grandfather says, do you know how to drive manual? Sure I do. I'd never driven one, but I'd shifted from my dad. So I go get the truck. And man, I was nervous. And no one else is in the truck. We're on his farm, so it's legal. And I remember pop that clutch, throw it in, go flying forward. And my point is that I was really scared. Then, again, turn 16, I get my permit. I walk out to the car. I still remember this moment like it happened yesterday. I'm walking across this really busy street, and I just think, this is real now. Like all that talk that I was giving the last 4-6 years, this is real. And the first day I drove with my dad, I really chickened out. I said, Dad, maybe you should drive from here. And my dad goes, oh, no. And maybe that's where I got that from too. I get in the car, I drive. Don't you know I ran 2 stop signs and a red light that first day? So it's nerve-wracking. It's a totally different thing being in a parking lot or on a golf course or on a farm than it is on a road with real cars.